In this video, we'll look at another application of loops. We are going to start with this form, and the form has an input where you can type in a value. In this case, we're just showing 10. And then we have three buttons for the three kinds of loops: the while, the do until, the for next. And the purpose of this is to just sum up the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to n. And in this case, we'll start with 10. Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and open up the code window. We'll start with a while loop. The program already has the click button, the click event for quit, that is, and this time I've changed it up a little bit just to show you something different. Instead of putting end, you can also do close with parentheses. And of course this will just clear out the output box, the list box. Alright, so now let's write the code for the while loop. Since we are importing a value, then we'll need to have a variable for that. Let's just call it n. So dim n as an integer. We will also need to have some variable to hold the sum of all the variables. So let's make another variable called sum that's also an integer. And also we'll need a counter that goes from 1 all the way up to n. So let's do dim counter also as an integer. To get things going, we need to initialize the variables, so we can import the value for n with our usual try parse technique. So integer dot try parse, and then the text box is called text input, so text input dot text, comma, and we want to put the value into the variable n. The other two, sum and counter, we should set those to 0 to begin with. So let's say set sum and counter to 0. So that's easy, just sum is equal to 0 and counter will be equal to 0. So that gets us going. Now we want to enter a while loop, and inside the while loop we are going to let n go from 1 up to the value of n, and we'll accumulate the sum in our variable sum. Okay, so while the counter is less than or equal to n, then we just want to accumulate the sum. Well, when we start out, sum and counter, those are both 0. So let's add sum equal to sum plus counter. Then let's write out the value of sum and counter. Of course, this will be 0 to begin with. So it's listout.items.add. And I want to print out sort of a table here. I want to print out the value for the counter and the value for the sum. So counter, ampersand, and a bunch of spaces, up about 25. Okay, so we'll separate those two columns, and then an ampersand and the value for sum. After we print those out, in order to move to the next value for the counter, we have to add one. So the same as we've done with previous loops. So we move counter to counter plus 1. Now, just given this, let's go ahead and see what the output looks like. Okay, so sum starts with 0, counter starts at 0, and if we go through the loop, counter will be 0 all the way up to 10. So let's go ahead and run the program. So the form pops up, and we have the value 10 already in the text box, so let's just leave it there. I'll click the while button, which will execute this code, and you'll see we have the counter on the left starts with 0 and goes up to 10 by ones, and on the right side we have the value for sum. So to begin with, they're both 0. When counter is 1, then we add 1 to sum, and it's sum. Counter goes to 2, but when we add the counter 2 to the previous value of sum, we have 1 plus 2 is 3. So counter is increasing by 1 each time, and each time it increases, we add its value onto sum. So, okay, 3 plus 3 is 6. Counter goes to 4, we add it to the sum to get 10. The counter goes to 5, we add it to the sum to get 15. So this continues until we get through all 10 integers. So by the time we get to 10 and we've added it to the previous value of 45, we have the number 55. And you can check this with your calculator if you'd like, but the sum of the integer values 1 through 10 really is 55. Now, let's add a header to this. Up at the top here, instead of having nothing in our list box, let's write just the header for the two columns, for counter and for sum. So to do that, we just have another list out. So list out dot items dot add. Well, that's clear. We don't want that. We want add. Then double quote counter, and I'll make that uppercase. A couple of spaces and sum. So this will print to the list box, this header, and then we'll have the two columns for the counter and for the sum. Okay, so the program's running. Now let's click the while loop. So this time you see we did get counter on the left and sum on the right, and then we have all the numbers beneath them. Alright, so this illustrates that you can use a loop to do a summation of a series of numbers. In this case, we just use the integers 1 through n, but we could choose to add any sequence of integers that we would want. We could add 5 plus 10 plus 15 and so on like that, so it's up to us. But by using a loop, then we can easily write a short amount of code which will add up and save the sum for all those variables. Now, to continue this program, let's do the other two loops. Let's go to the design view. Let's double click the do until loop. We have the click event to go with that, and as you know, it's very easy. If we've written the while loop, we can do the do until very easily because we only have to change 2 lines. So scroll up to the click event for the while loop, and let's highlight everything between the private sub and end sub. Let's copy it, then let's move down, paste it into the do until. Everything remains the same. We just have to change this while at the top to do, and we change the end while to loop until, and then we come up with the terminating condition. We want to loop until counter is greater than n. So that is all we need to do to implement this do until loop. So let's run the program. And the form will appear shortly. We will pull the form over here so we can all see it. So now we have the while loop. The while loop still works great. If I clear this, I click the do until loop, then you see we get exactly the same sequence of numbers. So now we'll do the same thing with the for next loop. Go back to the design view, double click the for next loop, then we can paste in also what we just did. So let's see, I don't really want to get everything, so let's get the dim statements and the try parse and the line that prints counter and sum. Let's paste those into here. With this for next loop, we really don't have to have the counter equals 0 line, so we can take that out because the for next loop will take care of that. Alright, now let's write the for loop. So we have for counter equals 0 to n, and since we're going by 1, we don't really have to put the step here because the default is 1, but I'll include it so that we can see the entire set of options for the for loop. Okay, now inside here, I can go borrow the code from the previous loop. We do need to sum, add the counter to the sum each time. We do need to print it out each time. So I'll copy those 2 lines and we'll put them inside the for loop. So we'll add 1 to our counter and we'll print those out. And that's all we need for the for loop. The step takes care of adding 1 each time, and we go from 0 to a definite ending point. So we don't have to have the test like we do with the while loop or the do until loop. So that does all 3. Let's run the program. And the window will pop up here soon. So I'll drag the form over here. So here's, we're still doing the numbers 1 through 10. So here's the while loop. So we get the table there. Here's the do until loop. We get the same thing. And then the for next loop, you see we get exactly the same numbers. Now before we leave this program, let's look at a different value here. So instead of 10, let's clear this out. Let's sum up the numbers 1 through 100. This will scroll off the list box, but that's okay. We'll click the while loop. And you can see we start out, we have the first 10 numbers that are visible, but then we can scroll down and counter is going by 1 each time. And it goes all the way up to 100. And the sum gradually increases. We keep adding the value of counter to the value of sum, so it keeps growing and growing and growing, so that by the time we get to 100, we see that the final summation is 5,050. Okay, well, the sum of the first 10 integers was 55. The sum of the first 100 is 5,050. And if we did 1,000, we'd find out it's 500,500. So there's a certain symmetry to this. Well, let's clear this and let's click the do until loop to show you that does give you the same answer. And one more time the for next loop, and that gives you the same answer as well. So this little program then shows you that you can write a loop and you can use that loop to sum a series of numbers. In one of your previous examples, all we did was to print out the numbers. In this case, we're summing them all together and then giving you the final answer. Well, that's it for this example, so we'll stop this video.